a very sick girl. Two little girls were happily skipping along in a park not very far away from their schoolhouse. They weren't dreaming of anything different happening that afternoon. All of a sudden, they heard an angry voice a little way away from them, and turning around, they saw an older girl. She was shouting, and they could hear that she was mad about something. "What's she so mad about?" said one of the girls. "I don't know, but she looks as though she's mad at us about something." "Let's hurry home," said one of the others. "Mother's always said that if anyone gets mad at us, we should hurry home and not stay, else they might try to start a fight, and then there'd be trouble. So let's go home as quickly as we can, shall we?" So off they set, running swiftly across the park to the other side. They'd nearly got across the park when they heard the girl shout again. One of the little girls turned her head to see how close the big girl was, and as she did so, that big girl, who had her hand lifted up with a rugged big stone in it, let that stone fly, and it hit the girl right on her face. "Oh," she said, as she sank down to the ground. "Oh, Ellen!" cried the other two as they ran to pick her up. "Are you hurt?" They could see that she was badly hurt. Her face was all covered with blood. Blood was pouring out of her nose, and she was just crumpled up. They helped her up, but she could hardly walk. "What shall we do?" they said. "What shall we do?" They looked across the road, and there they saw a little store. "Let's take her over there, and she can sit down on a chair." So they dragged her across the road, and several people who had seen what had happened came and helped them. They gathered around. The girl who'd thrown the stone had turned around and run away as fast as her legs would take her. She was scared at what she had done. The people were so sorry for little Ellen. "Oh, you poor child," they said. One of the men who had come in the store had a carriage outside, and he looked down at little Ellen and said, "Would you like me to take you home? I have a carriage outside, and I'd be glad to take you." Ellen looked at the blood going down her coat and forming a pool on the floor, and thought, "Oh, if I got into his carriage, I'd bleed all over the pretty cushions in his carriage." So she shook her head and said, "No, thank you." "I'd be so embarrassed," she thought, "if my nose bled all over his cushions. No, thank you, I'll be all right." So he went away, but she didn't realize how very weak she was. So she stayed a little while, and they tried to mop up her face. And presently she said, "I think I'll be all right now." So her twin sister, Elizabeth, and the other little girl, her friend, took hold of her, one on one side, one on the other, and helped her up out of the chair and out of the door of the store and down the street towards their home. Oh, how hard it was to walk. She was so weak and so dizzy as she walked along. and her head hurt so badly, and her nose was still bleeding. She felt so ill. She walked a little way, and then she just crumpled up and fell down on the sidewalk. Elizabeth and her friend tried to keep her up, but they couldn't. And so, half dragging and half carrying her, they got her home. Two brave, helpful little girls got her home. Oh, how sorry her mother felt when she saw a little girl like that. She put her to bed, but Ellen didn't recognize her mother. She was unconscious. She was in a coma. Poor Ellen. And Ellen didn't come back to consciousness. If she had been taken ill nowadays, her mother could have taken her to an emergency room, and perhaps a brain specialist could have looked at her and operated on her and made her well very quickly. But in those days they didn't have the good hospitals that we have now, and the clever surgeons that we have now. And so it took a long time for Ellen to get well. So Ellen was put to bed. But her mother was so afraid that she might fall out of bed because she didn't know what she was doing. And she told her children, "Watch her. Elizabeth, you watch her. And Robert, watch that she doesn't fall out of bed." And then she thought, I must do something to make sure that she doesn't fall out of bed when the children are not here, when they've gone to school. So she called a carpenter and said, "I want you to make something. I know what. Make me like a cradle, a large cradle with sides and low down. And then I can place that downstairs in the kitchen or the living room. And I can put Ellen in that when I'm working." And that's what the carpenter did. He quickly made a big cradle, big enough for a 9-year-old girl. And Mrs. Harmon, her mother, put her in that. But all this time Ellen knew nothing about it. She was unconscious. Now and then she would just groan, as though something was hurting her. But when her mother spoke to her and quietly spoke her name, Ellen, she didn't respond. She didn't say anything. She just seemed to know nothing that was going on around her. Sometimes Elizabeth would come to the door and say, "How is Ellen, Mama?" And her mother would shake her head and say, "She still doesn't know what's happening. Elizabeth, we must pray for her." So Elizabeth would go away and she would pray for her. And the other children would come to the door and look in quietly. They wouldn't play noisily anymore. They'd go about the house very quietly while Ellen was so ill. The week went by and still Ellen was unconscious in that large cradle. But Mrs. Harmon didn't give up. Many times she got down on her knees and prayed, "Oh, Father in heaven, you love this child. Please make her well, if it is your will." She'd always ask that, "If it is your will." But she felt it was God's will to make her Ellen better. Somehow she felt she was going to get better. The neighbor ladies came in, and they'd look down at Ellen. They'd say, "She's not getting any better, is she? That poor child." And the next week went by, day after day, and Mrs. Harmon would look at Ellen and talk to her. "Ellen, can you hear me, Ellen?" And still Ellen wouldn't say anything. She was still unconscious. And the neighbors would say, "You know she's going to die, Mrs. Harmon. Why don't you give up?" "No," she would say, "I think God is going to make her well. I'm praying for her. Why don't you pray too?" And other neighbors would come in. And one kind neighbor came in and she said, "You know she's going to die. And I'll tell you what I'll do for you. I'll buy a robe for you so that when she dies, she'll have a nice robe to be buried in." "Oh, don't do that. Not yet," said Mrs. Harmon, "because I think God is going to make her better. We have so many good promises in the Bible." So the second week went, and Mrs. Harmon didn't give up praying. And the third week came, and the days went by. And still Mrs. Harmon prayed. And she remembered the promises of God. "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find." But always she asked if it's God's will. And one day she saw a movement, and she looked. Ellen's eyes opened, and they looked intelligent. And she called to her again, "Ellen!" And Ellen spoke. Oh, it sounded like music to Mrs. Harmon's ears. "Mama," she said. "Oh, thank you, God," said Mrs. Harmon. "Ellen," she said, "I'm glad to hear you talk." "Mama," said Ellen as she looked all around her, "what am I doing here?" She looked at that strange cradle that she was in. She looked all around the living room. She couldn't figure out what she was doing, sleeping there in the living room instead of upstairs, in the bed with her twin sister Elizabeth, where she was usually sleeping. "Why am I here?" Her mother came close to her, bent over her. "Don't you remember, Ellen?" "Remember?" Ellen said. "No." "Remember what?" "Don't you remember about the accident?" "The accident?" "No. What accident?" "Never mind. You lie back and shut your eyes. I'm going to get you something nice to eat." So she went off into the kitchen to make her a nice supper. Oh, it was so long since she'd had a meal, and she was so glad she could fix a meal for her little daughter again. Oh, how her heart sang as she fixed something for her to eat. She went in and fed her something, and she saw a little color come back into those pale, thin cheeks. And she watched her, and then Ellen asked her again, "Mama, why am I in this funny thing here? Why am I downstairs? Am I ill?" "Yes, dear," her mother said. "You have been very ill, very ill." What accident was it, Mama? What accident was it? I don't remember. Her mother asked, think, dear. Don't you remember something hurting you? No, I don't remember, Ellen said. So Mrs. Harmon sat down in the rocking chair, and she told her all about the accident, all about that jagged rock that had hit her on the nose, and how she'd been brought home by Elizabeth and her friend, and how she had lain there in that big cradle for 3 weeks, and how her mother had prayed for her, and how God had heard her prayers, and now she was well. And then Mrs. Harmon said, shall we thank God that He's heard our prayer? And Ellen said, yes, let's thank Him. So the two of them thanked God that He had heard. Satan hadn't wanted that little girl to live. He so much wanted her to die. He knew that God had a great and wonderful work for little Ellen to do in this world. So he wanted to get her out of the way before she did it. But God put His great protecting hand over little Ellen as she lay in that big cradle, and He kept her alive so that she could do that special work that He had for her to do, for you and for me. And that's why she is alive, was kept alive, and why He heard the prayers and answered Mrs. Harmon's prayers for Ellen. Ellen's father does not recognize her. When Ellen had her accident, her father wasn't at home. He was down in Georgia on a business trip, and he was away for several weeks. So when he came home, it was a great day for the family. The children were all anxious to tell him all the news. They had to tell him all about what was going on at school, everything their friends were doing, all about their pets, all about what they had been doing everywhere. And he was anxious to hear about them. But most of all, he wanted to know about Ellen. He knew about her accident, and he was so eager to see her. He was so eager to find out how she was, for he too had been praying for her. And his eye was looking all over, trying to find where Ellen was. Where was she? He couldn't see her anywhere. There was a little girl over in the corner, but it wasn't Ellen, he knew that. Some strange little girl. She must have just come in from the neighborhood somewhere, just wandered into the house. So at last he said to his wife, "But where's Ellen?" And his wife pointed out to that little girl all over by herself. "That's Ellen," she said. "Is that Ellen?" he said, surprised. He couldn't believe it. So changed. The Ellen he remembered was a plump, cheerful, happy-go-lucky girl with round cheeks, a cheerful face, and here was this thin girl with a white face, and he just didn't know his little girl. Ellen heard that conversation, and she knew that her father hadn't recognized her. Oh, how terrible it made her feel that her own father didn't recognize her. She felt awful. She put her face in her hands. My own father doesn't know me. I look so changed, she said. But her father went up to her, and he took her in his arms, and then she felt so much better. He told her how they were praying for her. He told her how they would be praying for her too, and how God loved her and had something special for her to do, and she felt better after that. Hard days at school. As Ellen got stronger, she was very eager to get back to school. But her mother and father weren't so sure about her going back to school. She was not very strong. She had a very sore throat. She couldn't breathe through her nose because the tissues in her nose were swollen. She had headaches and she got dizzy. No, she wasn't very strong. But Mama, Daddy, I do so want to go back to school, she kept saying. She loved school, and she didn't want to miss all the good things that went on at school. You know how you don't like to miss school when you have to stay away. All sorts of good things go on at school, don't they? There are trips. There are special visitors who tell stories. And there are sometimes birthdays when the mothers bring a birthday cake. And there are special projects that you have at school. Oh, all sorts of things. And Ellen thought of those things. She didn't like to miss them. And she wanted to get on with her work too. She didn't want to get behind the others. Then one day, her parents talked to the teacher. They said that they didn't feel Ellen was really strong enough to do the work, but she was so eager to get back. They didn't know what to do. Well, why don't you just try her, the teacher said. And if we find that she can't do it, well, she'll just have to stop and try later. So one bright morning, Ellen happily set off with her brothers and sisters to the little red schoolhouse. There the teacher gave her a seat right in the front where he could keep his eye on her. The first lesson was reading. Ellen got out her book and found her place. "You read first," said the teacher. She opened the book, but something was wrong. Her eyes were blurring and she couldn't see the words. She rubbed her eyes, but still she couldn't see. She held the book a little nearer. Still she couldn't see. A little farther away. Still she couldn't see. The letters ran together. The teacher was looking at her. "All right, Ellen," he said. "We'll pass you." And he turned to the boy next. "You read," he said. Ellen felt the hot tears coming to her eyes. "Oh, I can't do it," she said. "Maybe when my turn comes around again, it'll be all right." She tried. She blinked back the tears. But no, she couldn't see. And when her turn came around again, she still couldn't see those letters. They were just running into each other. She hung her head Oh, she felt so bad that she couldn't read. Next came a spelling lesson. The teacher had written the words he wanted the children to copy on the board. And Ellen looked up at the board. He'd written them very large, and she could read them. She was right up at the front, and they were written in large hand. "I can see those," she said, "and I know I can write them." But she didn't realize how much her hand was shaking. And when she began to write, her hand shook so much that her writing came out all shaky and spidery. She looked at it. Oh, that was terrible writing. She wouldn't get a good grade for that. The teacher looked down at her. "You're having trouble, aren't you, Ellen?" She nodded her head. The teacher looked to the back of the room where a big girl was. "Would you like to come and help, Ellen?" he said to her. "Gladly," she said, and she came and took her place beside Ellen. "Ellen, I'm going to help you write," she said. "Now listen, you just relax, and I'm going to put my hand over yours and help you make a nice C like this." And she helped her, and Ellen made a beautiful C just as she wanted to, and then an A, and she was so pleased with it. "Oh, thank you," said Ellen, and the girl smiled, an extra big smile. Do you know who that girl was? No, it wasn't her twin sister. That girl was the girl who had thrown the rock at her, and she was so glad to have the chance of doing something good and helpful for the girl she had once hurt so badly a few weeks before. Recess time came, and Ellen thought, "Now it'll be all right. I won't have any problems in recess," so she skipped happily out to the field where they were playing. But oh dear me, there were problems out there. Some of the girls were gathered into groups and they were whispering. Yes, looking at her and whispering about how funny her face was. Some of the boys were pointing at her. She knew they were talking about her and her ugly face. And again Ellen cowered all by herself. The big girl came up to her and comforted her. The teacher came out. He saw what was going on. He spoke to those children about the golden rule. Poor Ellen. She understood that day that our looks have a lot to do with the way people feel towards us. But Ellen learned that having a happy expression was much more than having a beautiful face, and she learned to let the love of God shine through the ugliness of her face. Ellen didn't stay at school very long. She had a cough all the time. Her throat hurt her. Her hand shook. She became dizzy. And the teacher talked to the parents and said she wasn't able to do the work. So they told her, "Ellen, you'll have to stay at home until you're better." She was so unhappy about that, because it was Ellen's ambition to be a teacher. And she said, "Oh, how can I be a teacher if I can't finish school? I've got to finish school if I'm to be a teacher myself. My whole life is ruined. All my plans are ruined. But her mother told her, your plans, your life may be ruined, but God has plans for you. He knows what he wants you to do. And that is true, because God had wonderful plans for Ellen. Ellen was going to be his special girl, his special messenger, and she was going to teach not just boys and girls in a classroom, but boys and girls, men and women, not only in the United States, but all over the world. She was going to teach and preach and speak to them, not only with her voice, but through her pen, through papers and books. And she has become a wonderful teacher of us all. How thankful we are for Ellen. Ellen and the cow that got stuck in the mud. The Harmon family had their own cow. Every child in the family had several chores to do, and one of Ellen's chores was to go and fetch Bossy the cow every afternoon from the gate of the pasture and take her up to the barn where she was to be milked. Ellen loved this chore. Bossy was a great pet, and she loved to lead her up to the barn. So one afternoon she set off to get Bossy. She went down to the gate of the pasture and called out, "Bossy!" But this afternoon Bossy wasn't there. She called out, "Bossy!" and looked around. No sign of Bossy anywhere. Now lots of little girls would have said, "Well, Bossy isn't there, so I'll just go home and play and tell Mama that she isn't there." But no, not Ellen. It was her responsibility to find Bossy. So she went through the gate and across the pasture and looked all over, calling out, "Bossy! Bossy!" all the time. But she couldn't see a sign of Bossy. The opposite side of the pasture was a little strip of woodland, and she thought the Bossy might be in that strip of woods. She went across the path and through the woods, still calling out for Bossy and listening. She got into the wood and along the path, and when she called out Bossy, she heard an answering moo. "Ah, there she is," said Ellen. "She must be down by the stream." She hurried on to the stream, and there was Bossy. But oh dear, she was halfway out of the stream, but her front feet were stuck in the mud, and she couldn't get out of them. That's why she hadn't come. She was just stuck in the mud. Now what would you have done? Anybody else would have run home and got an older brother to go and get her out, but not Ellen. Ellen said to herself, "It's my responsibility to get Bossy home to the barn. Now what can I do?" She just looked all around her to see if there wasn't some way of getting Bossy out of that mud. What was there? Well, there was some hay around, some nice firm hay. So she got armfuls of that hay, and she put it on the bank where the mud was, lots of it, right in front of Bossy's feet. And then she went and got some good sweet grass, the kind of grass that Bossy liked to eat. And she held it out to Bossy. Oh, Bossy was glad to see that nice sweet grass. She opened her mouth wide and took a big mouthful of that sweet grass and chewed on it. That was good. Then Ellen went back and got another handful, a bigger handful this time, of sweet grass, and she went up to Bossy. But this time she didn't hold it close to Bossy's mouth. She held it about 6 inches away from Bossy's mouth. And Bossy wanted that that sweet grass very badly. So she strained to get it, but her feet were stuck in the mud. And Ellen stepped back a little bit and took the sweet grass a little farther away from her. And the cow saw that she couldn't get that hay unless she got her feet out of the mud and reached for it. And so she tried very hard to get her feet out. And she tried, and she tried, and she tried, and presently she got a foot out. And as she got it out, Ellen got hold of one of her horns with one hand, and she pulled, and then she got the other foot out, and between them Bossy got out of the mud and onto that nice firm straw. And then Ellen gave her the rest of the grass, and she led her all the way back through the wood, across the pasture, and through the gate, and up to the barn. Ellen had used her head. She had shown that she was really resourceful. Instead of giving up, she looked around her and thought, what can I do? I have a job to do. I'm not going to turn it over to somebody else. I'm going to see if I can't do it myself. We can learn from her, can't we? To do what we have to do, look around us to see if we can't meet the challenges that come our way. Ellen finds peace of heart in the camp meeting. And one day, when she was about 13 years of age, her father came home one meal day time and said, "Mother, Ellen, there's going to be a camp meeting at Buxton." Buxton was about 16 miles away. "Let's see if we can't go there." "A camp meeting," said Ellen. "Oh, that would be fun. Can we go?" "Yes, I think so," said Mrs. Harmon. "It would mean a lot of work to get ready for it, but let's see if we can't go." So they got busy getting their clothes ready, baking goods, and getting the food ready, because the camp meetings in those days were very different from the camp meetings we go to today. They had no cafeterias, but they got ready, and then they took the long journey of 16 miles. 16 miles doesn't seem far to us, but in those days when you had to go slowly, slowly, in a horse and carriage, that was quite a long way. The little family went along, and they pitched their tent, and they set up camp. Oh, how exciting everything was. They watched the other families arrive and set up their tents and get ready. The people greeting each other, the children getting acquainted with each other. And then the meetings. Oh, the singing was so thrilling as the people sang together, so many voices blending together, singing to God. Ellen loved it all. Ellen had a very special reason for looking forward to that camp meeting. She hadn't been feeling very happy lately. She'd been kind of worried. She'd often thought, I wonder if God really wants me in heaven. I'm not good enough. I don't think my sins are forgiven. And she would look miserable because she was sure she wasn't good enough. And she did hope that she would hear something in camp meeting that would help her to feel happier. So when she went to the meetings, she listened and listened, hoping she would hear something that would help her. In the camp meetings in those days, they didn't have the special things that we have today. There was no junior tent, or early teen tent, or primary tent, or kindergarten tent, or cradle roll tent. Oh no, they didn't have special tents like that. The children just sat with their parents, but they didn't mind. They didn't know anything better. They sat quietly, played with their dolls, listened as much as they could, and the preachers always had one little story, one little corner of the sermon, especially for them. But Ellen was getting bigger now. She was 13, and she could listen to a sermon. And one day she was very intrigued by the sermon the preacher was preaching. It was on somebody she knew very well from her reading of the Bible. It was on Queen Esther. You know all about Queen Esther, don't you? And the preacher told about her and about how bold she had been. Do you remember how bold Queen Esther had to be? She had to go and present herself to the great King Ahasuerus and make a request to save the lives of her fellow Jews. And it was a difficult thing to do, because there was a rule in the kingdom that you couldn't appear before the king without being summoned. And if you did, and he didn't hold out the golden scepter that he always kept by his throne, then you didn't know what would happen to you. You could be put to death. But Esther was desperate. She had to do something to save the lives of her people. And she had determined that she was going, whatever the price, to appear before the king and make known her request. So she determined, and she went before the king. She didn't stop halfway there and say, "Oh, I can't go, this is too difficult," and then go on a little way and say, "No, I don't think I'll go, this is too hard." She just went boldly down towards the throne room. And even though she knew she might lose her life in trying to get the king's attention, she determined that that was the thing she was going to do. So she went before the king. And the king did hold out the golden scepter, and that meant that she had his favor. And she used all her tact and asked him not the big favor at first, but a smaller one. Would he come to a banquet she was preparing? He did. And then she invited him to another, and only then, when she felt he was ready, did she make her request, and it was granted her. But she didn't swerve from her purpose to make her request. She was bold. And the preacher drew the lesson. He said, that's how we must go to God. We mustn't go to him and say, I wonder if he will hear me. I wonder if he will forgive me. Am I too wicked? Oh, thought Ellen, that's just what I've been doing. I've been wondering too much. I must go like Esther. I must go boldly to God and say, please, God, please give me forgiveness. Please give me peace in my heart. And just then the preacher said, will any men and women, or boys and girls, who want the peace of God and the assurance of his forgiveness, come to the front and kneel before his throne? Ellen watched as men and women and boys and girls left their seats. I'm going too, she said. And she got up and went with them. And they knelt. And they asked God to forgive them for their sins and to send them peace and happiness in their hearts. And then Ellen felt such peace and joy. She began to smile and feel happy. Now she knew what it was to have real peace and joy. She wasn't worrying about not being forgiven anymore. She knew how much Jesus loved her and wanted her to be his child. At last she had found real peace. The Little Girl with the Parasol. Now, while Ellen was in that camp meeting, she noticed a little girl of 6 years of age. And this little girl had a little parasol. It was a beautiful little colored parasol. And that little girl always had it with her. She had it with her when the sun was shining to keep the sun off her head. And sometimes she had it up when the raindrops were falling to keep the raindrops off her head. And she had it with her when it wasn't raining and when the sun wasn't shining. And she would twirl it around and just admire it and think, I hope people are looking at my pretty parasol. And she would keep looking at it and thinking, oh, it's such a pretty parasol. I hope people are looking at it. And she would sit in the meeting beside her mother and keep twirling her little parasol around, looking at it. One day the preacher was talking about giving up everything for Jesus and not putting anything before our love for Jesus. And the little girl was getting a little bit worried. And she was holding on to her parasol. And she was saying very quietly, I don't want to give up my parasol. I don't want to give up my parasol. Her mother told her to hush. She didn't want her talking in the meeting. And the preacher kept on talking about not putting anything before Jesus, that it's so easy for us to put other things before Jesus, to put our homes and the things we possess before Jesus. And the little girl was listening, and the Holy Spirit was speaking to her. And the meeting was nearly over, and all of a sudden the little girl said, "Jesus can have my parasol. I love Jesus more than I love my parasol." And she held up her beautiful little parasol. And the people in front of her turned to look round at this little girl, and the people behind all looked at the little girl and wondered what she was saying out loud. And the meeting finished, and people stole glances at that little girl. And so the mother explained to them that she had been given that lovely little parasol, and she loved it very much. She loved it so much that she took it everywhere she went. She took it out into the yard when she played. She took it to her meals when she ate. And she even took it up to bed with her when she went to bed, just like a doll or a teddy bear. She was putting it before God. But now the Holy Spirit had talked to her through that preacher, and she saw that she was putting that before Jesus, and now she didn't want to put it before Jesus. She had won a victory. So our mother explained to her that she didn't have to give up her parasol. Jesus didn't want it, but she could use it so long as she didn't put it before him. She could use it to keep the sun off and the rain off, but she could not take it to bed with her or show it off, but use it just in the way parasols are meant to be used. And she understood this, and she never forgot that lesson. And Ellen never forgot that little girl with a parasol. And she often thought about it later, when she saw people who had many possessions. Perhaps they had a lot of houses, and those houses were more important to them than serving the Lord, or a lot of money, or big carriages and lots of horses and animals on their farm. And nowadays we can have things that we put before Jesus. Perhaps we love our bicycles so much. Perhaps we love our toys or our clothes. Maybe we love our television programs, and we'd rather watch television than study our Sabbath school lessons. Then we're putting them in front of Jesus. And that shows that we love them and make a God of them and love them before we love Jesus. So we can learn a lesson from that little girl with a parasol. Ellen and her friends are baptized the Bible way. Ellen went home from that camp meeting at Buxton, and as she went home, everything looked so much brighter and better because she had the peace of Jesus in her heart. And she went to see her minister, and she told him, "I'd like to be a real member of the church now." And he said, "Good, Ellen, I'm glad of that. We're having classes for young people and preparing them to be baptized." And she said, "Good, I would like to be baptized." So he told her, "We accept you on probation, and then if you show that you're ready, we will baptize you. And he said, you understand how we baptize? We take some water out of a font. A font is like a beautiful bird bath that they have in some churches, and there's a little water, and we take the water and sprinkle it on you, and that shows that you're baptized. Well, Ellen said, well, pardon me, sir, but I don't want to be baptized that way. Oh, said the minister, what are your ideas? Well, said Ellen, I read in my Bible about baptism, and I don't find that they baptize that way by sprinkling water on people. Tell me some more, said the minister. Well, said Ellen, when Jesus was baptized, John the Baptist put him right under the water, clear under the water. And when John baptized the other people, he put them all right under the water and then took them out. They were buried under the water. And that's how I want to be baptized, in the Bible way. Well, that's right, said the minister. They were baptized like that in Bible times. But you know, Ellen, that was a long, long time ago. And the way we baptize people by sprinkling some water on still shows that we believe we need water, and we think it's quite enough. So why don't you let us do it the way we do in our church? All right? Well, said Ellen, I would like to be baptized the Bible way. I still would like to be. Well, I tell you what, Ellen, said the minister, let me have some of the ladies in the church talk to you. All right, said Ellen, but I still think I'll stick to my way. So some of the nice ladies in the church talked to Ellen, and she attended the classes. And she and some of the other young people talked together, and they studied their Bibles, and they looked up baptism and all the verses about it. And they couldn't find anything in the Bible about being sprinkled with water. Always the people in the Bible were buried in the water, and they came up to a new life. That's the way, they said. And 11 of her friends said, Ellen, let's ask the minister to baptize us that way. So they went again to the minister, and they said, we really want to be baptized the Bible way. Well, he said, if you really want to, I don't see any reason why I shouldn't baptize you that way. So he made the arrangement. And one cold, windy fall day, they went down to the bay, and in the waters of the sea, Ellen and her 11 friends were baptized one at a time. Oh, what a lovely feeling it was as Ellen went down into that watery grave. She felt that the old Ellen was being buried, and a new person was coming out, a new Ellen, and she gave herself to Jesus and said, Jesus, I want to be yours, to work for you all my life. And Ellen did work for the Lord all her life after that. A preacher comes with news to Portland. Very soon after her baptism, a man by the name of William Miller came to preach in Portland. not in the Harmon's own church, but in another church. William Miller wasn't a regular preacher, but he could preach. He was a farmer who loved to study the Bible and loved to study history. And as he studied the two, he found that they went along together, and that the Bible showed all that was happening in history. And as he read the two, he said, "This is wonderful." And he found out that we are living right at the end of time. The books that he most loved to study were the books of Daniel and Revelation. People told him, "Oh, don't study those books. Nobody understands them. They're closed books." But William Miller said, "I don't think God would put any books in the Bible that he didn't mean us to study and understand. I'm going to study them." And study them he did. And what treasures he found in them. So he went to Portland after preaching in many other places. Mr. Harmon came home one day and told about this preacher coming. He said, "We've got to go and hear him. He's preaching about Jesus coming, and I've never heard anybody preach about that. And I am taking my Bible with me, and if he doesn't preach according to my Bible, then I won't listen to him. But if he preaches according to the Bible, then he's all right." So, taking his Bible, Mr. Harmon led his family down to the church, and they all listened. Ellen sat there, fascinated, as William Miller opened the book of Daniel and began to preach. For several days he stayed there in Portland, and he preached on many topics in the book of Daniel and in other books of the Bible. He showed in how many ways we can tell that Jesus is coming again. He told about that wonderful dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. And she learned that we are living right in the days of the end, that Nebuchadnezzar lived in the days of the head of gold of the image, but we're way down in the feet, right at the end of that image. And then he told about the dark day that had already taken place before she was born. And then he told of something that happened when she was just a tiny girl, the falling of the stars. Oh, how wonderful! "Oh, think of it," said Ellen. "Jesus is coming. He's coming soon. And all our troubles will be over. And this terrible, ugly face of mine, I won't have it any more. Jesus will give me a beautiful face in its place. Oh, I'm so happy." And then one day he told about that long time prophecy that Daniel saw. And he told that it would be finished in 1844. 1844, said Ellen. "Why, that's nearly here. That's only 2 or 3 years from now. Oh, we've got to hurry up and get ready." And so everybody got excited about getting ready. Everybody? No, not everybody. A lot of people said, "Oh, I don't believe that." And a lot of people in the Harmons church said, "Oh, he's a fanatic. Do you believe all that?" Don't you listen to that. But the Harmons did believe it because they saw it all in their Bibles. And the Bible is true. And after a while, they were turned out of their church because they believed that Jesus was coming again, and their church didn't want them anymore. And other people were turned out of their churches. And so the people who believed that Jesus was coming were called Adventists because they believed in the Advent. And they had no church. So they would meet on Sundays in different places, perhaps in homes, perhaps in farmhouses, farm kitchens, or in schoolrooms, or wherever they could. And people laughed at them, and they were persecuted sometimes, but they held on to their belief that Jesus was coming again.